This is the Dairy Download, brought to you by EverAg Insights and the International Dairy Foods Association, where we offer extra sharp market and policy insights on dairy. I'm your host, Phil Plord.
And I'm your co-host, Kathleen Wolfley.
This week's episode is all about the 2026 market outlook. That's right, it's our annual All-Star Panel Edition, where we gather our dairy expert friends for a roundtable discussion. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, Kathleen, where are we now?
Well, Phil, CME spot prices as of Friday, January 16th. CME block cheddar closed at $1.29, down 2 cents on the week. Barrels finished at $1.36, down 4 cents. Spot butter was up a nickel to $1.36, and the spot non-fat dairy milk market closed at $1.26. Phil, I think that the most important thing in the markets today is still milk production. We saw November milk production in the U.S. up 4.5% year over year. That's kind of old news at this point, right? We have a milk production report this coming Friday. I believe that's January 23rd. And at least the EverAg estimates up another 4.5% year over year for the month of December. Clearly, we have some weak year over year comparisons that are easy to beat in California, right? So that's helping to skew the numbers a little higher. But in general, when you look across the market, we're not really hearing a lot of people screaming, hey, there's not a ton of milk out there. There's been a little chatter here and there about maybe not as much milk as anticipated as we head into January. But in general, there still seems to be plenty of milk around. And guess what? We've got new cheese plants that are taking more milk, making more cheese. We've got more product available in the marketplace. We're clearly seeing that fold into weaker commodity values, especially on the cheese side of things. How about for you?
Well, I'm curious about the launch of the new Wegovy GLP-1 pill. And I think it's an important subject still. It was important in 2025. I think it's another big topic for 2026. According to investment firm TD Cowen, in the first week of the pill's presence in the marketplace, there were about 5,000 scripts written, mostly for starting use, so newcomers to the medication. That compares to like 1,900 for the first week of Zepbound in 2023. I don't know. These medications are getting cheaper, more accessible. The lowest dose version of the pill is $149 a month. And to me, the thing that underpins the whole GLP-1 story, the biggest thing of all, is that the medication seems to work. And you're looking at 20 to 30% reduction in calorie intake. I think that has profound impacts for demand, some for the good for dairy, protein mania, some for the bad, which would be, fast food, certain snacking applications. And so I think we're still in the relatively early innings of this story, even though what do we see? Gallup said earlier this fall that 12% of Americans were using these medications. I think the number is going up. I think the pill form is a big deal. So I think the debut of Wegovy in pill form since our last conversation is the most important thing right now.
You know what's funny too, Phil, is that our colleagues that have conversations with folks in Europe and across to the rest of the world say that the chatter on GLP-1s is starting to pick up across the rest of the world too. So I think there's a lot
story
of
this week too about how some of these medications are going off of patent in certain countries that they've been out for a while because some of the core of these is diabetes medications that have been around for more than a day. And there are going to be some generics available in other parts of the world. The journey to that in the U.S. is a little longer, but these medications are about to get even cheaper in certain parts of the world. So, yeah, this story is just getting going in my estimation.
Well, what's your stat of the week?
My stat of the week is 2,904. And according to company reports, that's the number of Casey's convenience stores in the United States. They're in 20 states, mostly in the Midwest. In a story that's perhaps related to the GLP-1 story, there's been some talk about whether or not the United States is at maximum pizza. Or have we hit the pizza peak? The Wall Street Journal had an interesting article a couple weeks ago. I've written about it a little bit myself. And one of the parts of the phenomenon is that Casey's brought pizza to rural America. There's a couple other C-store chains that did the same, Quick Trip in the Wisconsin, Minnesota area. But Casey's is now the number 5 pizza company in the United States by some accounts. And so when you think about peak pizza, part of the reason we might be there is because I can't imagine a place, or it's hard to imagine many places in the United States today where you cannot get a hot pie because two-thirds of the Casey's C stores are in towns of less than 20,000. If you drive across Iowa, rural parts of the Midwest, you see them all over the place. And so I don't know, it's impressive growth for it's more than double the number of stores they had in 2010. And they've brought pizza to rural America. And maybe we've hit the point of saturation.
Did you know that you could eat pizza for breakfast?
Well, you started in college, but they have breakfast pizzas are a big item at Casey's, for example.
Yeah, well, the gas stations around me too. It's a hot commodity, and when you're on a road trip and it's like, well, we could have gas station breakfast pizza.
Casey sells 40 million pizzas, 40 million whole pies a year.
That's
I mean,
incredible.
that's a number.
Huh.
What's your stat of the week?
My stat of the week is plus 4.5. EU milk production in November, in addition to the US milk production, up 4.5% year over year. Just staggering numbers continue to roll out of the EU. By our math, that's an additional 2 billion liters of milk over the course of the last 4 months. And some of the early estimates for December suggest that milk production, at least in places like the Netherlands, up around 7% year over year. So I think that as we look at the US, as we look at the EU, there's just a lot of milk out there.
Yeah, the weekly numbers we see for the UK, Germany, and France are still over 5%, I believe.
There was some chatter this afternoon, some articles from, I think it was a UK publication of people, dairy farmers starting to talk about low milk prices. So maybe we're starting to crest of low milk prices are starting to impact what decisions people are making around culling. There was some chatter around slaughterhouses starting to fill up in Europe. So maybe we've crested the peak on European milk production, but I still think it's a key story as we go into 2026.
Yeah, because when European milk production is up 4.5%, that's the equivalent of more than 6% in the US because Europe is bigger than the US.
Right.
And while global demand has been maybe sneaky good in the background, it ain't that good to absorb US plus four something, Europe plus four something, New Zealand plus one, two something. So yeah, I think that's it's an important number to follow. Speaking of, speaking of important numbers to follow, the segment of the show is the Fearless Prediction segment. And we put some of our team to work to figure out who won the 2025 Fearless Prediction Sweepstakes.
And the numbers came in this morning
Yeah.
and I looked at them and I said, I demand a recount.
We had unaudited numbers that did not meet Kathleen's satisfaction or her memory because in that unaudited number, she got beat pretty soundly. So we called in some more people to audit the results, and what did we find, Kathleen?
A tie.
A tie.
But alas, the year is not over, Phil, because I do believe that I still have 4 outstanding predictions from the November and December episodes, and you have 1 outstanding prediction. So
So
there's
my
a
max is 12. Your max is 15.
yeah.
Yeah, well, we won't have a chance to get to that, so
Yeah, well, darn.
we're gonna call it a tie.
With an asterisk next to it.
No. I think, well, I don't know. If you have the wherewithal to keep track of the rest and come back someday and say, by the way, I won, we'll have to acknowledge it because the numbers are the numbers. But somehow I went from winning to being tied to likely losing in the course of about 4 hours and 20 Slack chats this morning. So, all right, well, here we go. It's time to light ourselves on fire. What's your first Fearless prediction of the 2026 season?
My first fearless prediction of the 2026 season is that January cheese exports will fail to beat 100 million pounds.
Taking the under 100 million on cheese exports.
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't take the other side of that. I think that's, and then we'll know that by late February or March. So
Check that one off the
we'll know mine by next Friday, or
Okay.
we'll know mine by this Friday,
Yeah.
because I'm gonna keep looking at butter cold storage numbers, which have been erratic. So you might think, oh, Phil, this is a low up. But, the counts have been a little bit funny. So typically, butter stocks go up 3 million pounds between November and December. I'm going to take the over because, this December we saw prices come down to the lowest level in many years. And so it would stand to reason that we had above average stocks growth. But keeping in mind that in November, the cold storage report still showed we were down 1% on inventories, which seems to stretch credulity, just given where the markets were. So I'm taking the over 3 million pounds. December cold storage coming to an internet poll near you, January 23rd.
Well, Phil, we had a really great panel session this year talking about the 2026 dairy market outlook. Let's get right to it.
We're excited today to convene our annual All-Star Analyst Panel for a look at dairy markets and issues for 2026. We have 3 outstanding guests. First, Sara Dorland is the managing partner at Ceres, a company specializing in risk management, market research, and financial consulting services for agriculture and food-based businesses. Hey there, Sara.
Good morning.
Mike McCully owns McCully Consulting, a firm providing strategic consulting services to dairy and food companies. Client projects include business analysis, purchasing and supply chain strategies, market research, and commodity risk management. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And last but certainly not least, Sarina Sharp. For 17 years, Sarina has helped dairy producers navigate the commodity markets and manage their financial risk. She loves to communicate the why behind the ups and downs in the dairy, livestock, and feed markets, and she writes regularly for the Daily Dairy Report. Hello, Sarina.
Hi, Phil.
Okay, 2025, lots of moving pieces. Started with high prices and low milk production, ended with high milk production and low prices. What surprised you the most about the dairy markets in 2025? And then do you believe that trend will carry into 2026? Sara, you can go first.
I think the big surprise is the strength of the protein markets. We just can't seem to get enough of it. And based on everything I've been looking at, it doesn't look like that's going to slow down as we get into 2026. Potentially how far our buttermilk markets fell, going from deficit to surplus as quickly as we did.
Yeah, it seems like once we found the fat, we couldn't hide from it anymore. Mike, what's your take?
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with both of those. And I'd maybe even more a macro look. You think back first to last year, we've got all these new plants coming online, all this cheese, and then we throw in all the uncertainty around tariffs and trade. And the industry kind of got through all that. There was some bumpy, waters at times, but industry is resilient and seemed like we got through that in pretty good shape. So you kind of look back and what could have been in terms of a lot of problems with trade and so forth. It seems like some of that's really, a lot of that maybe really didn't materialize.
And do you think some of these things are bleeding over into 2026?
Right. The trade picture definitely is going to be a little cloudier here for a little while, probably more price related than it is tariff and trade dispute related. And the plants are still coming. There's still ramp ups of a number of these plants. So there's still more product. We haven't got through it yet. There's more to come.
How about you, Sarina?
I'll give you a twofer. On the domestic side, I was surprised how quickly we were able to add cows in the US despite the heifer shortage, and just how long dairy producers were able to maintain their exceptionally low coal rates. And then looking abroad, just the pace of growth in Europe in the second half of the year was astounding.
That seemed to come out of nowhere.
It really did. Will it continue into 2026? I think in the early part of the year, yes. But those low prices are going to start to bite on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thinking about the milk piece, Sarina, do you think we change course in 2026 as it relates to growing cow numbers, growing milk production?
So I think we've got two opposing forces. And the answer to that question is going to be which of those has the greater impact. On the one hand, we've got a few big operations that are yet to finish construction and start filling up those barns with cows. We had a lot of those operations coming online in the second half of 2025. I think that was a big contributor to our growth in cow numbers. I think we've got sort of a tail end of that's going to continue in 2026. On the other hand, because prices had been high for such a long time, producers who were thinking about retirement did not exit the industry over the past few years. So I think we've got a lot of pent up retirements and high cow values. So it is an attractive time to get out now that dairy prices are much lower. Those two fundamentals, high cow values and low dairy margins don't often occur at the same time. So I think we're going to see some industry exits. And the question about whether or not we continue to add cows is, do those large expansions and the resilience of the producers in the business outweigh some of those exits? I think the path is going to be slower growth, then a period of kind of stable cow numbers, and then eventually contraction. But we're a ways away from that.
Sarah, I know that I've personally, we all are on the public speaking circuit a little bit here and there. And I know personally, I spent more time talking about beef and beef on dairy this year than I've ever spent in my career by a wide margin. Talk about how you see Sarina alluded to high cattle prices. Talk about the beef side of this story as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. It's been forever since we've had to talk about beef margins and the implications for dairies. It's just something that's fundamentally changed the calculus at the farm level. And certainly something that we have to consider. Yes, the margin forecast for dairy margin coverage looks lower as we get into next year, certainly better than where we were in, let's say, 2023. But when we add on to that the cull cow values, you just begin to wonder if there's an incentive to slow things down or just kind of idle and keep it moving. That's a really big question, but a legitimate question, because farm economics look a little bit different in 25 and 26 than they did just 5 years ago.
Mike, this has to be like a worlds collide moment for you, right? For many, I knew you for many years. You never took a vacation day that didn't involve a cattle show. You've been hanging around the cattle side of things for a long time as a personal enterprise. What's your view on the beef situation and how it's impacting dairies? And do you think the beef on dairy dollars will extend milk production growth, or will it peter out here a little bit?
Yeah, I got my first beef animal was back in the early 80s in 4-H and FFA, and I've had beef cattle ever since and never, ever seen a market anywhere near this level in terms of, it's everything. It's purebred animals, it's crossbred animals, feedlot, cow calf, you name it, and it's not stopping. The trend that we saw in 25 continues in 26 and likely continues for another couple of years, because the same sort of calculus for the beef ranchers as dairy farmers right now. Do I keep a replacement heifer back or do I sell it for beef? And a lot of the beef ranchers have been just turning these calves into cash, and they'll kick it ahead another year or so. But even today, if you keep that heifer calf is born today, doesn't have a calf for 2 years, and that's beef that won't be in the beef market for another year and a half or more beyond that. So it's definitely changed the calculus at the beef ranch as well as on the dairy side. And I think you were joking before about this. The beef, dairy farms are more beef ranches now. I don't see that changing this year.
I want to go back to your comments around trade. Talk to us a little bit about how you see 2026 shaping up in terms of U.S. trade opportunities.
All right, on the fat side, it's going to still be strong given the U.S. pricing. If nothing else, we're cheap butter and hydrosmoked fat. You got a new plant in California that's got pretty big aspirations on UHT cream. That's going to make some fat disappear. Same thing when it comes to whole milk powder. So over time, I think the trade will be a bigger component. I think the U.S. will shift from exporting maybe a couple percent of butter production or butter fat production to something maybe closer to 4 to 5%, and that'll help balance the market out here. Cheese is going to have some tough sledding here, I think, for a little while, given the lower European prices. And on milk powder, it's just been a pretty dull market here for quite a while, and I don't really see that changing. And China, everybody's looked at China over the years. Peak dairy for China for imports was several years ago, and I don't see that changing either. So if you got little wobbles in some spots around the world on the economy and demand, and you've got all the major export regions growing supply, that's going to take a little while to get that back into balance.
Sarina, I'm curious, is you're talking to a lot of producers across the country. Do you think that there's a recognition of the importance of exports here in the marketplace?
Dairy producers are much like the average American citizen. You have a variety of opinions on trade and how that impacts them. Sort of politics gets mixed up in that. I think producers recognize that exports help us to grow as an industry, but they also don't love that it they perceive that it contributes to volatility. If we have to keep our cheese prices super low in order to keep cheese moving abroad, then that can often feel like exports. Now that we're an export facing industry rather than in the 90s when we were kind of hunkered down and putting cheese in caves instead of sending it abroad, that prices were more stable then. That may have been true, but we were not able to grow very much, and cheese was relatively cheap when we were putting it in caves as well.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've been talking about cheese or butter in caves along the Mississippi, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, we are feeding it to consumers around the world, and there's a growing appreciation for both of those products. I think that we've done the butter sector of the industry a long-term favor this year by pushing international consumers to give US spec butter a try. And so now I think we have more opportunities going forward.
So, Sarah, from your perspective, what do you think about the longer term opportunities in US butter? Do you think that if we're US butter exports, that is, do you think that there is this momentum that we've built here over the course of 2025 and on into early 2026? Or do you think that a lot of the butter export opportunities are really more price based?
Yeah, I think long term, the United States has got some good opportunities. Do I think that we started kind of building that opportunity and base of sales that we need in 25? Probably not. It'll be a big test. We have never put together, we've had phenomenal export years in the past, but we've never strung two together consecutively. And that's what I think 2026 is can we do that? Certainly, I think long term, we can, just like we did in milk powders and whey and cheese, we can build those sales relationships and become that consistent exporter of fat into the global market. It's not a place that we've ever had to be. We just occasionally have to, once every few years, clear out the system, and then ours kind of takes back over. That doesn't seem to be the case, given the amount of fat that's in our milk, and just the hyper focus on protein these days. It's just something that seems like it could take us longer to regain that balance. But certainly, I think we can certainly mount that sales effort to ensure that we're a consistent exporter. But I think this year, like I said, is a big test to see if we can string together a second impressive year.
Let's bring it back home to the United States and talk about consumers and demand. We don't have the final numbers for the year yet, but it just looks to me like when you look at implied use of cheese, maybe squeaked out a small gain in 2025. Butter was a little better, but it wasn't like awesome or spectacular. It was better, but it was not blow the doors off. Consumers have concerns about inflation, jobs, food service trends are soft. How do you see the demand landscape domestically going into 2026, Sarina?
We've heard a lot about the K-shaped economy, and I think that's exactly what you see on consumer demand. People at the higher end of the income scale, they're doing well. They have assets that have been appreciating. That includes farmland, that includes their home, and it includes stocks and just Wall Street investments. But if you aren't benefiting from inflation, then you're really feeling the pinch. We've got a few other factors in there. The value of SNAP benefits that people receive monthly has come down. We've got about 24 million Americans who are seeing their monthly premiums for the Affordable Care Insurance go up. We're getting a little more aggressive, making sure that people are paying down their student loans. That's relatively new. I think all of those are contributing to an already existing strain on consumer budgets for those at the lower end of the income scale and creeping up into the middle class. And just population wise, the middle class, that's where the numbers are in terms of consumer spending and what people eat. So I think that pizza, fast food, casual chains, they're all going to have to demonstrate value. When they do, people show up. But I'm particularly concerned on the dairy side about the amount of dairy that people consume in the form of pizza and through a coffee shop. Those are two things that are extremely discretionary. It's pretty easy to cut those out of the budget. So if the economy sort of moves along at this sort of not terrible but not great pace, then I expect more of the same. But if we see some sort of economic hiccup, then I think people will really pull back, especially in those sectors.
Sarah, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal today that sort of says we might be at maximum pizza, which I never imagined we could be in the United States. How do you see the situation? And then curious, let's just say that pizza is kind of going to be flat here, and that's been a huge growth engine for cheese. How does that impact the protein space, right? It's like, hey, by the way, we need the cheese to make the protein. The whey products. How do you see all that shaking out? And what's the consumer's appetite for paying more and more for high protein stuff?
Yeah, interestingly, there was an article in Bloomberg where they were surveying, especially the folks on the GLP-1s, they're eating a lot less. What are they spending on food? And in most cases, they're spending as much, if not more, than they were before. So I think that might, again, be a good news story for the dairy protein side of the equation. But to the point that both you and Sarina have made, how much can we get on the pizza side, the burger side? Those have really shown that they continue to struggle here. There are some restaurants that look like they're innovating, with smaller meal sizes to either A, reduce the price point on the menu, or B, to address the folks that are eating a little bit less these days. That may be something that helps bring folks back. I mean, we definitely need to see food service perform. I think the biggest thing that I continue to be puzzled by is the cheese paradox, right? It's a high, especially on the mozzarella side. Sure, there's fat in it, but there's also quite a bit of protein, and we just haven't quite got that protein story to translate into those product categories yet. It'll be interesting if we make any headway on that this year. That could be a bit of a game changer for the cheese front.
Mike, do you see retailers leaning in that direction? What other phenomenon do you see in the retail space?
I think retail on cheese has been, like I said, kind of just okay. There's been times where it's been a little better. I think the big opportunity here for cheese, specifically around what Sarah just mentioned around GLP-1 and so forth, is to better position cheese as in this high protein world. I know go back a year or so ago when GLP-1 was really starting to bubble around quite a bit, and like the overall thought with dairy and cheese was less is good for cheese. And as it turns out, cheese on its own is good, but when you start putting cheese on pizza, burgers, sandwiches, carbs, things like that, layer cheese on a plate of nachos, that's not so cool in GLP-1 diets. And I think we're seeing some of that impact here over the last year or so. So, and I just saw here recently, Chipotle is now, they're now advertising high protein meals. Well, I don't know if they did anything different than what they were doing before, but they're marketing at least around protein. I think that's going to be an opportunity for cheese kind of figure out, not just at retail, but just in general.
I don't know, Mike. One of those high protein offerings just looked like a bowl of chicken, but I could have been wrong.
82 grams of protein though in that big bowl of chicken.
Yeah. I mean, you see, pumping more protein into pretty much everything. And Phil, your joke has been the high protein Pop-Tarts. So when I hear about high protein mustard and so forth, it seems like
protein mustard. I have not seen that one yet.
Yeah, that was one here in the last month that it seems like we're getting close to the end of the road on pumping more protein into different foods, but who knows?
Sarina, what do you think is the biggest opportunity that dairy faces in the year ahead?
We've talked a lot about this GLP-1 adoption, and we've got GLP-1s available in pill form starting this year for those who can't stomach the needle. So I just think the number of consumers around the world who are going to be taking advantage of these medications is, I don't want to put a number on it. It's extremely high. And so the protein health halo on certain dairy products, I think, is our biggest opportunity. Ahead of this, I took an informal survey of my health trendy friends and asked them what they're focusing on. And they consistently mentioned protein. And then they also said, I've been prioritizing protein for more than a year now. This year, I also want to manage my fiber intake. But what was interesting to me is that no one talked about things that they were cutting out. The consumer now thinks about nutrition in terms of satiety. What can I eat to make sure that I'm full so that I'm not overindulging? And I think there's real opportunities for dairy in that space. It's tasty, it helps build muscle, it keeps you full. So I think this emphasis on satiety and nutrients is probably going to be important in the year ahead. Protein is a part of that story. It's not the only part of that story, but dairy fits well in that space.
Sarah, do you think that there's risk that we find ourselves in a position, given the focus on protein, that we'll be talking about making cheese for the protein in the year ahead?
It's certainly a high risk proposition for us that cheese is cheese is now the vehicle to get to whey. It's become the byproduct as we continue to mine protein. I really think I also look at it as a tremendous opportunity. I mean, if we lean on some of the studies that we've done that dairy fats don't react the same way as most saturated fats, and that cheese can be that good, before bed snack. Because to Sarina's point, that casein is a slow amino acid release. It helps you feel full through the evening. Getting that cheese can be your dessert food. It would be something that could help push things along. I think we really do have to focus on our product that got us over the last 20 years is slowed down. We need to probably spend a little time on it and figure out what the opportunities are for cheese in this new market that protein's so focused in on.
And since you have the mic, Sarah, what do you think is the biggest opportunity that dairy has in the new year?
I think in the new year, just kind of building off of what we've been doing. I think that's really important. I think my analogy of about a month ago was we have to somehow navigate with our farms how to, hit the gas and the brakes at the same time while we deal with a bit too much milk in the global markets. But if we can come out the other end and be kind of in the position that we've been in, to the point that we made, this is a year with 4%, or last year was a year with 4% milk growth at the end. It sure doesn't feel like it in some cases. And so it's a matter of how we get through this and continue to focus in on those exports that should hopefully help balance things out for us while we get through the spring.
And Mike, how about for you?
I get a little concerned that everybody is talking about protein. So the old, Wayne Gretzky saying is skate to where the puck is going, not where it's at. And it feels like the puck is at protein. Everybody's skating to it right now. I think fiber, as Sarina mentioned, is a new frontier that it has a lot of opportunity, I think, for dairy once you figure out how that would work. So I think that's a good opportunity here going forward in the domestic market. And as I mentioned earlier, figuring out how dairy fits in with GLP-1 diets going forward. U.S. has been at the forefront of this. But as I talked to people here recently, Japan is coming next. Then you've got China, and there's more to come. And as I mentioned earlier, when you go from shot to pill form and get the cost down, you've got even more people that want to take. And I think the article that maybe Sarah mentioned earlier, I believe it's something like 25% of the people in the U.S. are interested in taking the GLP-1 drug. So unless we start growing extra arms or legs or something, it seems like this GLP-1 drug phenomena is going to continue, trend, or whatever you want to call it. So I think from that standpoint, and it's not just dairy, food companies in general are really struggling with this, particularly if you get into more highly processed foods. This creates a lot of challenges for different companies and different products. I think there's a broader discussion happening around this as well.
All right, guys. Kathleen and I don't know the results. Actually, there's a little bit of the listeners of this podcast will have heard by now who won the 2025 Fearless Prediction Race between myself and Kathleen. Vegas has Kathleen as the favorite. I don't know who's got the envelope. We'll talk about that in the beginning of the show. But in the spirit of fearless predictions, let's get some from you. What is your fearless prediction for 2026, Sarah?
Do we see a year where cheese, butter, and non-fat all have a 1.2 in front of them at some point? That could get really interesting.
All right, that's fearless. That's not a safe prediction. Is it a prediction, or is it a rhetorical question you're floating out there?
It could get interesting. I mean, it's just a fearless prediction. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
We may go back to pre-2014 where we see cheese and butter being about the same number on average for the year.
We've been kind of flirting with that here lately. Sarina, you have the last word, the last fearless prediction for this panel discussion.
I took a producer focused, and I'm going to predict that dairy cow slaughter volumes will top 2025 and 2024 volumes, which would signal contraction.
The party's over, so to speak.
Well, I mean, when you hear the numbers that our other friends are throwing out there, I think the party is over.
All right. Well, that's all for our panel discussion today. Thank you all for joining us. Sara, Sarina, and Mike, appreciate all of your comments and considerations.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Thanks again for having this podcast.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
That's a wrap for today's show. As always, we want to thank our production team, Matt Herrick, Mariah Minnick, Andrew Jerome, and Jeff Cullen at IDFA, and Abby Bauer over here at Everag. If you are interested in what Kathleen and I do for our day jobs, check us out at ever.ag. And remember, if you enjoy this show, hit the subscribe button and leave us a favorable review on your favorite podcast platform. Don't hesitate. 5 stars, just fine.
Thanks for listening to the Dairy Download. Until next time, stay sharp.